And again, thank you everyone for joining us. We anticipated this may be a very small gathering this first time, as we know that our colleagues out in the districts are pretty frantic right now. So we're going to take you through just a couple of the topics and questions that we had. And then obviously at any point in time, as you know, you are free to chime in and ask for clarification. So let me move us ahead here. A couple of things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk specifically about the third grade reading guarantee and what that should look like in section 10 of the IEP. How to mark ETRs as non-compliant that did not get completed due to closure. We're going to talk about what you should do with information when a student withdraws prior to completing an ETR or an IEP. Helen is going to talk us through what happens for high school kids who did not get to finish their credits this past year, and also for students who don't have scores for alternate assessment, how that impacts graduation and other things like that. We also have a couple of resources to share with you for this virtual school year. Some IEP tips for virtual IEP meetings, best practices for creating take-home packets, and then we've got a nice infographic that really helps distinguish the difference between remote learning, homebound versus homeschooling, because we do seem to have a lot of confusion around that. Okay, so the first thing I want to tackle is the third grade reading guarantee. You have probably, if you've been through training with us, heard us talk about in section 10 that it is very confusing because section 10 asks, has the team considered, and then it lists all the things, concerns of the parents, yada, yada, yada. But at the bottom, then it really switches language and appears to be asking more of a direct question where it says, regarding the third grade reading guarantee, is the student on track? So that appears to be a direct question that you would answer whether or not the student is on track. And that is how we have provided guidance in the past. Now, OEC has said that they fully recognize this is very poorly worded and it is very confusing for folks. And we have people all over the state interpreting this differently. So in order to make it consistent across the state, OEC is suggesting that we all view it as we're simply saying, yes, the team has considered it. For any student who is K-3, if they are anything other than K-3, you're going to mark not applicable, but you are not actually answering whether or not the child is on track for the third grade reading guarantee. And again, it does read that way, but again, it's not being interpreted consistently. So just to make things simpler, we are now just going to interpret it as, yes, the team has considered it. We are going to continue to recommend that you address the third grade reading guarantee in the child's profile, and if there is a RIMP in place or other measures to address the reading deficit, that you would report on that in the profile. And then of course, if you're exempting the student, that's going to pop up in section 13. Okay, one of the other things that we are getting a lot of questions around is for evaluations that were not able to be completed due to the unexpected closure. How should districts mark the noncompliance in EMIS? And that's a really good question. As you know, if you were with us at all during spring when we kind of talked through scenarios, obviously we all had hopes that there would be some kind of federal wave to timelines, and we all know that there was not. So one of the things to remember is because the federal government did not provide any provision for flexibility, then that means the state cannot pass that on to us. And so they are required to report federally. So therefore you are required to, report it as non-compliant. And we are reaching out to OEC because we do have a couple of ideas. We don't know if they would be able to green light, because again, it all depends on how they have to report back to the feds and what that would look like. But what I will say is this: if you were offering to move ahead with the eval, whether that was remotely or whether that was, some face-to-face, but if you were making that offer and the family was uncomfortable and chose not to do that, then by all means, I would select that 05 parental choice. If you didn't get to the point where you got consent, because you were just in the beginning of that and then closure happened and, obviously you didn't move ahead, then I would use the 06 parent refused consent. Those probably are not going to be happening very often for most of your scenarios, but by all means, if you can use either one of those, go ahead and do it. For the rest, where it literally was prior to the go-ahead green light of using telehealth, that block of time before that, where we really had no options, you are going to have to just put the no identified reason. There is not an EMIS code that fits this, and we all understand that. And the one thing I want everyone to bear in mind is that, yes, it is going to show up on indicator 11. And yes, it is going to mean that, districts across the state have to write a cap for that. But the state also recognizes what happened. And so we anticipate that, they're not going to have a ton of hoops for everybody to jump through. It's a little bit of paperwork. We certainly are going to, as we have always done, even pre-COVID, have a session for helping districts create that cap. And it'll be a come one, come all. If you've got an indicator 11 finding, that happens to be the indicator that I take care of. And I will help everyone with developing language around, well, we're going to plan for a possible shutdown due to a pandemic nationally. And this is how we're going to plan for that. And that's literally what it is. So, so that's what we're going to suggest to you. I wish I could tell you that there was an EMIS code that was, we couldn't do this because of COVID, but unfortunately we did not get any flexibilities built in. And so that doesn't exist. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. I'm going to ask if there are any questions thus far about either third grade reading guarantee or the non-compliance for evals, and stop. And if not, then we'll keep going.
Hey, Dee Dee.
Hi, John.
So if I do have a situation where it really was the parent choice for the description you gave there, we would not expect a cap with that selection, I guess, or entry?
Correct.
Okay.
And yeah, you're exactly right. And that's why I'm saying if you have legitimate scenarios that could fall under parental choice or parent refused consent, then absolutely use those.
Okay.
Okay, great question. Okay, we also are often asked, and this is certainly probably more true maybe now during COVID, but happens, all the time, where the team is completing either an eval or is writing an IEP and the student withdraws before the completion of that. And so we're often asked, hey, we've got all this information, what should we do with this? And really honestly, what Helen and I would tell you is I would go ahead and put that information in and keep it. Obviously, you're not going to enter, the event into EMIS, but we all know that very often kids float out of our districts and then they float back in 3 months later. So certainly, if you've got a situation where student has left, but you still have all of that relevant information, I would go ahead and put everything in and then just let it sit there, because, you know, if 3 weeks later or 3 months later, Johnny comes rolling back in, you've got everything there just to pick up right where you left off. And remember, as long as that information was within a year, you can go ahead and use it. Now, obviously, if you go ahead and put that IEP into place, you know, you're going to be looking to see if anything has changed for the student. And we're not saying you might not have to make an amendment, but you wouldn't be starting from scratch. So that would be our suggestion.
And I'm just going to jump in here. It's Helen. I've been very quiet because I have a lot of allergies and trying not to cough or sniffle. Anyhow, this probably is even more important with COVID at this time, because I know there's been some students that, not necessarily in whoever's on this, that have transferred depending upon whether virtual, face-to-face, an online school. So just noting that, but I'm assuming if they had transferred, they would have asked for an IEP from the home district or an ETR.
Right, great point, Helen. All right, I'm going to let Helen take us through a couple of things really regarding some of our older students and testing. And then I'll pop back in and talk about Surrogate Parent.
Okay, I think this was kind of a specific question, but also I have received some calls about seniors that didn't meet all their credits. We know end of course exams did not happen, and you use the student's grade and the principal signing off. But then there were some other times that a student didn't complete grades. So basically those students would need to complete those credits they need to graduate. And then I think the question was what to do if a student was in that situation, needed to complete credits, but wanted to pursue option 4, but could not pursue option 4 until the credits were completed. Which would happen to the following year, next year, what to do with that student before. I think this might be a something we have to talk to the district more in depth, but I would say if that student has credits, they would be at school or virtually, wherever the school is. It's hard to keep up with all the districts right now because we have hybrid models, everybody in person, some schools all virtual, or a combination of both. So I would say that student would be completing those credits. As far as what the options, I'm assuming maybe we're asking this question because the student will possibly complete those credits in the first semester, or doesn't have maybe only but a couple credits to complete and then has the rest of the day. So I think I need a little more clarification here as far as what the need is.
Hey, Helen, that was our question at Waterloo. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. So we have a young man that did not finish his credits. He has a couple more classes or something he has to do to finish his biology credit. So from what Mom said, he's going to be done within the next couple weeks.
Okay.
Is that Maplewood's no longer accepting students. They also have a rule that you have to have your credits completed the year prior to starting. So he couldn't even go to Maplewood. My question is, if he does finish his biology in the next couple weeks, what do we do with him? Do I have to offer him a different placement? Does he kind of stay put in the meantime until next year? I just feel bad saying, hey, you just kind of have to hang out. Do we keep him in the system? Are we going to get dinged for keeping him in the system? This is obviously very new to me. So I
think it's very new to us, and nothing against Maplewood, but that flexibility, because we're not, I don't know when Waterloo actually started, but we're not quite into the 9 weeks, I wouldn't think.
Right.
But, And so he will be done within the next couple weeks. He'll have no more credits. I mean, he will need nothing else, right?
So, and what I explained, yes, that's correct. So what I explained to mom, at that point, he could choose to accept his diploma, or we could hold his diploma and continue to pursue something else. Now, is there, like, could I push Maplewood a little bit on this and say, hey, why can't he start?
Well, you certainly could. I'm not saying it's going to get you somewhere, but you certainly
Yeah.
could. And I would push them, saying, okay, this, especially with COVID too, because I'm not saying he would have completed, you know, depending upon whether we had a closure or not. But I think the whole COVID situation, I would try to push Maplewood just to see if he couldn't get into option 4, because with option 4, depending upon, I don't know if they just take a certain number of students, but I wouldn't see it that difficult for a student to come in within like the first 9 weeks. That's just me personally, but I worked in a high school. I worked with option 4 with many different, you know, scenarios. And I know ours was all in-house, but I would still push to see if there isn't a chance that he could just go into the program.
Yeah, and I completely concur with Helen. And I mean, I spent 5 years working at Maplewood and option 4, and it definitely seems like there should be some flexibility. Flexibility is, you know, the umbrella under which we are all operating right now. And as Helen said, COVID, we know, is a factor. Not that we could say that with certainty that he would have completed credits were it not for the closures, but it's certainly a factor. So I agree. I think I would really, you know, talk to them and see if, because we're not that far into the school year, it doesn't seem that there should be any reason that he couldn't start, especially if he's going to have those credits within the next few weeks.
Right. Are there, and I'm so new to option 4, is there a curriculum that has to be followed? You know what I'm saying? Because I guess I was just confused why they were so resistant to accepting him. I didn't know if maybe they thought he was going to be behind.
You know,
Option 4 supervisor was emailing me, asking me about it. So she was like fully intending on him coming to Maplewood. And then the director was like, no, he can't. It's been 2 weeks or something. And I was like,
well, yeah, as far as, I mean, there are different option 4 programs. I mean, they do have some sort of curriculum, but Dee Dee, you jump in here too, but in the past for me, the curriculum is more based on kind of life skills, job skills, getting the student prepared, and then, you know, definitely looking at job placements, interest, whatever. So I'm not going to say it's a curriculum. I mean, there is a curriculum, but I would not think the student would be, that they couldn't come in and be met fairly quickly with where the class is at. I don't want to say that it's not difficult, but I think the option 4 is, I would say option 4 is somewhat individualized, or should be, because you have students of, you know, all different needs.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an academic curriculum, as Helen said, and it does involve them being out in work placement with job coaching and things like that. So it is certainly individualized. So again, I think it warrants, you know, a meeting with MCC to talk about some flexibility there.
I was gonna say, have you reached out to Angela Pollicina?
Yeah, so Angela was actually the one emailing me and saying, hey, you know, let's get him in here. And then she was touching base with Jackie Pritchett. Jackie Pritchett touched base with her supervisor. That is who said, no, all credits to be completed the prior school year, so they should have been completed in 1920. And since he didn't, they weren't going to accept him. And then they said too, well, we're even beyond our 2-week enrollment period or something like that.
That's really odd. I thought they were hard up to get kids in that program because it was running low. So that just seems really odd.
And you're right, John, because I had been out there. Oh, I know Angela really well, and naturally Jackie. And see, I still think there are times that Angela for sure, and Jackie would have a lot more flexibility if they didn't have to go above them.
Agreed. I agree. So then what if, okay, so my question kind of still stands. So if I talk to Maplewood and they're like, I'm sorry, this is our board policy, we can't do this, yada, yada, then what do I do with this kid? Can he just stay put until next school year?
Okay, the only thing would be, I guess you would say, he's met all of his IEP goals, and he's met all of his graduation requirements. What does mom want besides Maplewood?
I think she just feels he's not ready to spread his wings and fly. That's
Right.
I got. So I think she was just wanting more. She mentioned that he has no interview skills. She mentioned a couple things option 4 would really help him with.
Okay.
I don't think she wants him to just be done, is the impression.
Right. And I can see that, especially if she was pushing for option 4, and if he doesn't have those basic skills, interview skills. And I'm kind of assuming you don't have someone that could work with him on any of that, or like he could do like an independent study of some sort. And I know with as crazy as this year is, me even suggesting that sounds ridiculous, but I know people that use
probably would do really well with this. Could that be done virtually?
Sure.
Yes. I was just going to say, I am right in line with Helen's thinking about, could you work on transition activities through his IEP that would tackle some of his deficits, and that could be done remotely?
Yeah, because quite honestly, I don't know if you are familiar with Ohio Means Jobs. That's all virtual. I mean, you go into that and create, somebody would have to help the student possibly navigate some of that, but there could be a lot of virtual, if you have someone that can interact with the student. As far as things that they could be doing, life skills they could be working on, similar to what they're going to get an option 4, or interview skills. It'd even be nice, truthfully, to, give him some training on interview skills. And what in the past, some people we used to even do is set up an interview, what's the word I'm thinking of? Well, it's not practice,
A
but
mock
yeah,
interview?
a mock interview. And you see that a lot of times on transition service activities, because now a lot of kids, for interviews, a lot of the, you do an online application, but most students will still go through an interview, and practicing those interview skills is a good transition activity. It could be a teacher, it could be maybe a counselor, just somebody working that, he would practice, and then, okay, we're going to give you a couple opportunities to practice your interview skills with someone maybe he's not as familiar with.
Okay.
Yeah, and Lauren,
I
just
really hope Maplewood budges a little bit, but I like this idea to have as a backup, just in case.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, just in the interest of time, you can always, connect with Helen and I, and we can talk through some more possible scenarios with you about that. But I think there are some options we could look at through his transition service activities, like Helen said, working on some of those skills. So we can bounce some ideas around there.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely give us, email me, because I can even go over the transition service page with you if we need to, and add in some stuff or whatever.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I don't know how many of you were on the OAPS conference last Friday, but Andrew Hinkle spoke about the alternate assessment scores for 2020, and I have had calls about, what's happening with that. Basically, there were people in the state that did not finish because the closure happened a couple weeks prior to the close of the alternate assessment window. But there were many who did complete. However, there were no scores. They were not able to do the set the standards and cut scores because they were out also. So What I'm going to say is, as long as the student participated, they completed requirements for 2020 and do not have to retest unless you want to retest them. I don't know what's going to happen down the road. There was a question about 2023 and if we're going to add in alternate assessment at different grade levels. That was talk along a year or so ago. But as of right now, if the student participated, and they would be able to be awarded points on their course grades with a principal sign off, just the same as end of course exams. And quite honestly, whether they were proficient or not, as long as they participated and completed the test, they're basically done with alternate assessment. Because I know some people started testing in the 9th grade. Most stuck with with it being a little different this year, stuck with the 10th grade. But I've had a lot of questions about, okay, what happens? Is this kid going to have to sit again? No, they are not, unless you would decide that. And also for spring 2021, it's going to be similar, but also we're going to have to look and see what happens with COVID, because we know that's an individualized test. So that's about all I have on that. Does anybody have questions? Because I know I had received a lot of emails about, when are we getting scores? There will not be scores this year. Okay. Dee Dee, we can move ahead.
Okay, so these are a couple of tools that Helen and I wanted to share with you that we thought might be really useful. So the first one is kind of an infographic on best practices for creating take-home packets. Obviously, we know that you all have some students in your district who, virtual learning through Zoom or whatever platform you're using may not be ideal, and they need something a little more concrete. And some of you were doing those take-home packets. So this is really just some best practice around making sure that those actually are effective in supporting the distance learning. Then there's also a nice infographic, because we've had, Helen and I both have had, directors reach out to us asking about scenarios where students are remote, or they're saying that the child is being homeschooled, and we have to really distinguish, wait a minute, is the parent actually homeschooling, or is the child homebound, or are you saying the child is participating at home but participating in school? So there's a nice infographic under IDA that really spells out the differences between those three scenarios. And then finally, Cadre, who is the Center for Dispute Resolution through CASE, created just a tip sheet to ensure that as you have these virtual IEP meetings, and again, as Helen mentioned, we don't want to think about it, but the reality is that we could be looking at closures again sometime in the winter if things spike up. So as you look at those virtual IEP meetings, they created a tip sheet just to help make sure that, you are kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's and doing that in the most effective way possible. So we've put links in here, live links for all three of those supports. And then finally, the last thing that I wanted to touch on, a question that came in late last night, and so I didn't make a slide for it, but we often are asked the question about like the role of the surrogate parent. Obviously, everyone understands in the IEP, you've got to have that signature and so forth. But then sometimes the question comes up, well, what about when we're doing an amendment? And the simple answer is this. The role of the surrogate parent is literally to be the parent. So the same rules and expectations would apply for a surrogate that would apply for a biological parent. As you know, you can have an amendment without a signature, because you can get that verbal agreement over the phone, through email, etc. Now, best practice, of course, is to always send that page home and get that signature or initial, but you can proceed with the amendment even without that. So the same rules, the same things that you would do in your district, whether that's, you know, the director puts their initials and time and date stamps it that they got verbal consent, whatever your process is, you're just going to follow that exact same process as you would for a biological parent with the surrogate. So any questions or comments about that, or Helen, anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, not about that exactly, but I will say, and the questions are coming, well, will people have to be recertified? No, as far as I know, but the state is looking at doing a new training for surrogate parents, because the one that's on is so outdated, but that's yet to come. I don't even know that would happen this year, but as far as surrogate parents, the only thing I would add is I know it's really difficult to get them.
Right, we do understand the challenges with that. So, okay, friends, well, are there any other questions or things that you would like to have some additional clarity around before we wrap this one up?
Hey, Dee Dee, how do you access those tip sheets? Is that going to be sent out afterward, or?
Those are actually live links, so you should be able to click when we put the recording on our website.
Okay.
When you're on it, you'll be able to click right on those. And yeah, I'm also happy to email them out. So if you email me and let me know, I'll just send them to you.
Okay.
Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions, Helen and I want to again thank you for joining us, and we'll be here every month, and we know that there are going to be lots more questions that come up as we all start navigating this sort of new normal. And obviously, there are some key critical things that we know you are all anxiously awaiting OEC guidance on, as are we. We've been in frequent contact with them. Again, we're actually on another meeting as this one is taking place with the state right now. So, you know, as those things get decided, we promise that we will be getting that information out to you as quickly as possible. We will continue to address things at forum. And then again, in our office hours, Helen and I will certainly get any new information out to you. So stay tuned.
And as you know, you can always email us in between times, because like I said, like Dee Dee said, this is really a new period for all of us. And we are also waiting for OEC answers to questions or clarifications. So I hope that everybody's had a good start. Take care of yourselves physically and emotionally. And we hope for the best this year.
Thanks,
Thank you, Dee Dee
everyone.
and
Have a
Helen.
good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.